With the festive season in full swing, the Social Development Department says their Gender-Based Violence Command Center is seeing an increase in violence against women and children cases during the festive season. The department further states that alcohol and other illegal substances are the key drivers of the seasonal increase. In Cape Town alone, authorities destroyed 3,000 litres of confiscated alcohol in the previous week, and on average, about 15,000 litres of alcohol are destroyed annually. And to further unpack this on safe alcohol consumption, we've roped in the head of research drinks at the Drinks Federation of South Africa, or DFSA, Dr. Shamal Ramesar. Dr. Shamal, season's greetings to you. Thank you so much for your time. So it's quite common fact, or at least should be, that South Africa has some of the highest rates of problematic drinking globally, with a relatively small percentage, though, of the population consuming alcohol at excessively high levels, contributing significantly to the national disease burden, which is also linked then to serious health as well as social problems. Talk to us about these worrying figures as well as data. How do we even shock users to think twice before a glass?
Season's greetings to all of the viewers. Alicia, thanks very much for having me on the show, and thanks very much for the question. So I must admit that some of the statistics that you are mentioning is quite outdated. It's based on previous WHO data, where newer data shows that when, in fact, South Africa is not as bad as we were previously made out to be. There is currently a national survey that's being conducted, and preliminary data shows otherwise to what you've just said, that South Africans do have, a better relationship with alcohol in recent years, and we are not ranked, amongst the global elite in terms of heavy drinkers. However, the alcohol industry are the first to admit and to acknowledge that there are several individuals that do have a poor relationship with alcohol. It is a product that is meant to be enjoyed, and somehow and sometimes people do tend to go overboard, and that is really what we want to use this campaign to warn against over the festive season. One of the main highlights, of the campaign is to ask all of our consumers to consider, their alcohol intake over the festive season. One of the most important messages that we can deliver, in conjunction with the WHO, whose statistics you were mentioning earlier, is that if you are going to drink, please drink in moderation. And moderate drinking, allows you to pace yourself. And also it doesn't, coincide with all of the deleterious health effects that we know is associated with behaviors such as binge drinking or heavy episodic drinking, as the WHO normally cites. So to the point that you initially, started off by saying, yes, South Africa has a culture of drinking, but recent statistics shows that our country averages are in line with global norms.
I wanted to quote the older statistics there, Doctor, to ensure that we are at least moving towards the right direction, because these are quite shocking numbers, right? You call it a poor relationship with alcohol, which is quite modest, right? Which is also interesting, Doctor, because around 73%, right, doesn't abuse alcohol. That's a fact. But the latter, especially, as you said, the youth now have kept dominating and also inflating these figures in recent years. So what do you think the problem here is then, Doctor? Are our regulation as well as compliance standards up to par with global requirements? What makes South African drinkers then so vulnerable to excessive intake of alcohol? We know there has also been widened calls for a total ban of alcohol advertisements, as we saw within the cigarette sector, but this will not completely resolve the issue.
Thanks, Alicia. I think you've quite hit the nail on the head here. So there are different measures that can be put into place, as purported by the likes of the WHO and so on. However, when you look at global research, you're starting to find that there is a tendency of decreased alcohol consumption over time. For example, when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, where most countries, as part of the United Nations, signed a pledge to reduce their alcohol-related morbidity and mortality by at least 20% by the year 2030. South Africa is one of the many countries that have already reached its target in this regard, which shows that all of the measures that the industry, together with the government and even our academics are putting into place are working for our country in terms of meeting our global metrics in terms of alcohol consumption. Of interest, South Africa is in keeping with also other global norms such as youth drinking, which is shown to be on the decline as well. But as you said, there are many people, not only in South Africa, but globally, that tend to abuse alcohol, especially when it comes to the festive season. And this is the time where we, as the Drinks Federation, would like to take the opportunity to remind all of the consumers to keep responsibility at the center of all of your decisions when it comes to alcohol consumption over the festive period. And this is not anything new. It's stuff that we constantly advertise and put out to our consumers. But at the same time, this year we spent a lot of attention on our retailers as well to encourage them to trade responsibly over the festive season. And this involves training through the likes of our member companies and sister organizations, where we've educated retailers, for example, not to sell to under 18s, not to sell to overly intoxicated patrons, not to trade outside of their trading hours, and then, of course, not to sell to, visibly pregnant females. And these are all part of their licensing conditions. It brings me back to what you initially said. We have great legislation in the country. One of the biggest challenges is enforcement of this legislation. And that is why the Drinks Federation, together with its members, have taken it upon itself, to go out there and to educate not only the consumers, but the retailers as well. As we believe, for example, alcohol retailers should be the guardians of their communities when it comes to alcohol consumptions, not only over the festive season, but all year around as well.
Absolutely, Doctor, because, we've seen the illegal taverns sprouting everywhere that has led to multiple incidents of shooting. So it's also significantly being associated to crime as well as the illicit trade of alcohol itself is just simply getting out of control. I would have loved to go on and on, Doc. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We're going to leave it there. But nonetheless, thank you so much for your engagement this afternoon. That is Dr. Shamal Ramesar. He's the head of research at the Drinks Federation of South Africa on the dangers of alcohol abuse here in South Africa.